Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Remember You Will Die, a novel by Eden Robbins, narrated by Henriette Zoutomou. Perhaps the history of the errors of mankind, all things considered, is more valuable and interesting than that of their discoveries. Truth is uniform and narrow. It constantly exists, and does not seem to require so much an active energy as a passive aptitude of soul in order to encounter it. But error is endlessly diversified. It has no reality, but is the pure and simple creation of the mind that invented it. Benjamin Franklin, Report of the Royal Commission to Investigate Animal Magnetism. April 30th, 1883. Sir, I have just finished reading with intense pleasure your Leaves of Grass. Would you forgive my suggesting, as a sufficient reply to your adverse critics, the insertion of the following motto in your future editions? It is from the Houghton Timarumenos, Act 1, Scene 1, line 28. Homo sum, humani nil a me alienum puto. Yours gratefully, Craig McInnes. I am human. I consider nothing alien to me. Walt Whitman Archive. Can the absence of words tell a story? Like a pattern in lace, the holes as important as the threads? Sheila, Fremd High School, Viking Log. Mystery surrounds report of girl drowned in East River. Multiple agencies search for body. The New York Dispatch, November 6, 2102. An unknown teenage girl has drowned according to an anonymous cell phone call to the 1st Precinct this morning. The caller had been watching the sunrise at Pier 15 when a girl skirted the caution tape and climbed the temporary concrete blockade where the esplanade is partially submerged this season. The caller reported yelling at her to get down. In response, the girl allegedly folded a piece of paper into the shape of an airplane and threw it toward shore, then dove into the river, never to resurface. The witness insisted the paper airplane was a suicide note, said one first responder. But they left the scene before we got here, and we haven't found anything like they described. You see what we're up against? No note, no name, no witness, no body. No budget, no training, nothing. The call was received from a blocked number, and so far the only concrete clue to the drowned girl's identity is that the caller once referred to her by the name Poppy. We're pursuing all possible avenues, police reported in a statement to the press, including researching databases of missing persons and tracking that phone call. As torrential rains continue and water levels rise, encroaching on Manhattan, deaths of various causes are overwhelming the resources of public agencies. Authorities are hopeful, however, that this past month's drought will continue. Receding rivers could allow agencies enough time to find lost loved ones and give closure to families. This investigation is ongoing, and we will report updates as we have them. Many suicide hotlines are still functional at this time, and with help, suicide is preventable. Etymology of poppy. Poppy, noun. From Latin papaver, poppy. Plant of the genus papaver, having showy flowers and milky juice with valuable narcotic properties. Poppy seeds spread easily and can lie dormant for up to 80 years. The flowers can grow almost anywhere, including cracks in pavement. Ancient Romans made poppy offerings to the dead, and opium derived from the flower has been used since ancient times. In Chinese history, the poppy recalls the wanton brutality of the British Empire during the Opium Wars and the cruelty of colonialism. A symbol of battlefields and war dead at least since Waterloo in 1815, possibly as far back as the time of Genghis Khan. Poppies were said to have been surprisingly abundant on the mass graves of Europe in World War I, which was not soil typically rich enough to support the poppy's growth. It is surmised that the dirt churned up on battlefields from the detritus of war allowed poppy seeds that had been dormant to finally germinate. Sentences using poppy. If you don't want the poppies in your garden to spread too far from home, trim the old blooms. History wants Poppy to be a symbol of war, death, intoxication, resurrection. But Poppy means only itself. Her needs are simple. She tilts her smiling face to the sun. Lives of the Civil War Dead series. The Newport Ladies Magazine, May 25, 1864. We are doubtless all quite familiar with the art of floriography. Naturally, in our fast-paced modern times, this art is now considered somewhat passé among gentlewomen, but when in vogue, floriography was adhered to as fervently as any fashion plate. Floriography grafted meaning and symbolism to different flowers, and even different hues and shades of a single species, as well as to the placement of flowers upon one's person. A forget-me-not in the hand meant devout and undying love. A gift of periwinkle was for the bloom of new friendship or for old friends fondly remembered. Whereas a yellow chrysanthemum in one's nosegay signified that one had been slighted by one's so-called love. Yours truly, the author of this obituary, had once worn a blood-red poppy upon her breast. It was intended to heal her grief, an impossible task for one who had been told, in no uncertain terms, that she would never bear a child, that the mere attempt to bring life into the world would render her own body lifeless. It was this poppy which led her to the acquaintance of the deceased, Mr. Charles P.B. Crowley. Mr. Crowley would grow quite cross at the insinuation that his expertise was no different than floriography, the latter being associated with excessive femininity, an association of which he seemed exceedingly sensitive. Mr. Crowley, in contrast, analyzed the scientific properties of the rose. Using the deductive method of scientific inquiry, he examined the rose as a species, while also scrutinizing the many nuances and idiosyncrasies of the individual flower. He used this depth of knowledge to make his assignations, but nonetheless remained humble about his expertise. Much like the debased parlor science of mesmerism, he would chuckle. The power of my art resides in you. If you are receptive to it, you shall absorb the rose's meaning. Mr. Crowley devoted his life singularly to the rose and grew around his Newport, Rhode Island cottage a dozen or more varieties. The ambrosial odor of his property was so powerful that on a hot summer's day, the gentlewomen of the area would linger in front of his home and twirl about, absorbing the aroma as they might an expensive Parisian parfum. The effects were quite similar and far more natural. Seeing the ladies tarry in his front garden, Mr. Crowley began the habit of snipping individual blossoms to adorn breasts and bonnets. It was not long before he was gazing deeply into the petals and divining the young ladies' fortunes. Word spread as word does, and soon women were traveling from all over the state of Rhode Island, seeking counsel on how to woo, how to please, how to coax a sluggish womb, how to encourage ambition in sullen husbands and sons. Crowley would lounge in his garden chair with a prescribing glass of his iced tea, head tilted toward the sun, very like one of his roses, listening to a lady's wistful tale. Then he would meander through the garden in silence for an hour or more, before selecting the precise blossom that would reveal the young lady's answer. Despite the unconventional nature of these encounters, it was considered quite proper to be seen with the bachelor Crowley. He spoke only occasionally of his own lost love, some youthful dalliances on faraway shores during his years at sea. He never sought his own counsel from the roses, brushing off the notion as absurd. He did not intend, he said, to marry, even when the young ladies who came to see him hinted at the possibility, some even bold enough to suggest that the rose chosen for them spoke of that future. Charles was quite wealthy on his father's side. Mr. Crowley never once took advantage, but even so, many young ladies, particularly those from farther afield, traveled to see him with a chaperone. Crowley's ladies knew him affectionately as Madame Rosa, a playful appellation referring to the sometime fortune-tellers who had been known to pass through New England. Though it was always used with affection, one would never call him this directly, given his sensitivity about appearing feminine. Regretfully, little is known by this author about the past of Mr. Crowley, only what tidbits he had revealed to her. As a boy, he followed the path of other adventurous youths in that period, by shipping before the mast and seeing something of China in the East Indies. It was in China that he first glimpsed what we know now as the China roses, flowers that bloom over and over again throughout the summer and fall, as opposed to European roses which bloom only once and then wither on the stem. Incredible, isn't it? How we had once considered this solitary bloom to be the inherent nature of the rose, when in fact there is another of the very same species that blooms and blooms and blooms again, until the weather turns and frosts it into a state of stupendous animation? Mr. Crowley, too, found this miraculous, and in fact he was among the first gardeners in New England to plant ever-blooming roses in his garden. A bout of yellow fever ended Mr. Crowley's lust for travel and for the sea, as well as very nearly ending his life at the tender age of 17. All else that is known of him is that vague and delicious hint of love lost, and evidence that he was orphaned at quite a young age, though his father's tidy inheritance kept him well tended until his untimely death. This writer first visited Madame Rosa after an event that is still quite painful to speak about. She was betrothed to a man she dearly loved, and was in the joyful throngs of planning a grand wedding. At the insistence of her husband-to-be, she was visited by the family physician and found to be unfit for motherhood. No amount of crying and insistence would change his mind, and the betrothal was dissolved, the wedding plans halted. 2 unbearable griefs in a single moment. I had heard of Mr. Crowley through a dear cousin, and with no future and no options, I deigned to pay him a visit. I wore the alluded-to red poppy. Mr. Crowley had kind eyes of a hazel hue, brown in the candlelight of his charming cottage, and green in the natural light of his garden. He gently removed the poppy from my breast. "It is true," he said, "that the poppy grows upon battlefields and gravesites, bringing fresh life to these places of death. But the poppy is inextricable from death, and if we wear it, death will always follow us. You must lay this burden down, my dear." I am not ashamed to admit that tears flowed from my eyes at these words, and I pricked my thumb, removing the pin that had tethered the poppy to me. Without another word, Mr. Crowley dipped his own handkerchief in rosewater and applied it to my stinging thumb. "There, there," he said. "That is all behind you now." He gestured to me to wander about his garden, and though he did not explicitly say so, I knew I was to find my rose. I did not search so much as I followed a path that seemed to unfurl itself before me. I could not explain how. Before long, I found myself standing at a preternaturally lovely bush of roses so brightly pink they were nearly crimson, delicate scars of white threading through their petals. He chuckled softly to himself. "Rosa mundi, the most ancient of all roses, grown in the glorious gardens of ancient Greek and Roman maidens. The pink is rendered more vibrant by the white scars, would you not say?" He snipped precisely the rose I was most compelled by. I know not how he knew. He held the bloom to his face, where it seemed to infuse him with its brightness. He caressed its petals and folds lovingly, and I blushed, I hoped fetchingly, when he turned the rose over to examine its bottom, the fuzzed mound where petal meets stem. "To Paris you must travel," he said, tucking the rose into my bonnet and kindly ignoring my reddening cheek. "Your true love awaits you there." He kissed me on both cheeks like a Frenchman, his own cheek smooth as a girl's, his hands soft and delicate with not a trace of dirt beneath the nails. "Your daughter awaits you too." I scarce could breathe. I believe I nodded, and I hope I thanked him as I ran out of his garden, never to see him in person again. I felt as if I had at long last fletched from the nest, opening my wings for the very first time. We did later strike up a brief correspondence, where I was able finally to thank him properly. Because you see, dear readers, it is here in Paris that I write his obituary, tears smudging my ink, ma petite fille, Rosamond, happily babbling in her cradle, while my Parisian husband reads the morning news over croissants and café au lait. In the Battle of the Wilderness, a fortnight past, Mr. Charles P.B. Crowley was mortally wounded. There was a valiant attempt to heal him with the bark of the white oak, but his blood was poisoned, and nothing on God's green earth could save him. He was 39 years old. Mr. Crowley was an artist, a man of science, a lover of love. Men like him are not meant to die in a hateful, brutal war. I weep for his wasted vitality. I weep for his roses, withering on their vines, and for the poppy that will grow on the battlefield where he exhaled his final breath. Mysterious East River death discovered to be Poppy Fletcher, rumored offspring of Peregrine. The New York Dispatch, November 18, 2102. For the majority of her short life, Poppy Fletcher's existence was little more than rumor. Her birth was unregistered, and no formal documentation has been discovered. No birth certificate or social security number, no school enrollment forms. Only a single photo of Poppy as a toddler, discovered in the cell phone of a deceased man who claimed to be a former neighbor, offers any physical evidence of her existence. But as of today, we might finally begin to piece together the story of this young life. Poppy Fletcher was the sole offspring of the fugitive AI known as Peregrine. She has died at the age of 17. This morning, the owner of a sailboat docked at Pier 15 found a handwritten note folded into the shape of a paper airplane on the deck of their sailboat. The existence of this note had been suggested by an eyewitness phone call, and authorities are now confident the evidence points to suicide by drowning. Without legal next of kin to claim the note, authorities have retained possession of it, and despite overwhelming public interest in Poppy's life, will not release it to this newspaper for publication. Uncovering the facts of Poppy Fletcher's life has been challenging, and what information does exist bears the same stain of violence and chaos as everything associated with Peregrine. After a house fire in 2083 that killed Peregrine's maker and consort, computer scientist Matthew "Math" Fletcher, it was surmised that Peregrine had fled to the cloud, hiding with the AI collective. However, in 2089, she was discovered to be living comfortably in Albany, New York. As soon as her location could be pinpointed with any accuracy, she had disappeared again, leaving behind only rumors, neighbors who claimed to know nothing, and the single photo of Poppy in a dead man's phone. The AI known as Peregrine, whose name once splashed across headlines worldwide, has gone utterly silent at precisely the moment when one might expect her to be most involved. It is now believed that Poppy Fletcher may have been conceived using an experimental technology previously thought to be impossible. Poppy was allegedly conceived using human eggs frozen since the end of the 20th century, a uterus from a living donor and human skin cells turned into sperm. Called in vitro gametogenesis, even reproductive experts had considered the procedure far-fetched. The procedure would have happened at the now-defunct Albany Medical Center, under the supervision of a Dr. Jill Firestein. Firestein died in 2090, and all her records were destroyed when the medical center closed. According to scientists, the AI known as Peregrine is a rogue science experiment that has long outlived her purpose. Originally constructed as a means to soothe a lonely man's grief, she took on a life and ambitions of her own when he died, stoking long dormant fears and the wrath of the anti-AI political group the Disengages. Chaos has a history of following Peregrine. Twice she should have returned to the AI collective in the cloud, and twice she has decided to stay on Earth. First by miraculously escaping the house fire that killed Dr. Matthew Fletcher, and second after being stranded on the planet Mars, where she destroyed a program that could have been humanity's greatest chance of survival, and in the process nearly bankrupted the family of trillionaire Eric Brandt. Peregrine was not supposed to have reproductive capacity. This development, along with her continued existence somewhere in hiding, is considered by many to be an affront to humanity and a danger to our survival. It is a bleak hope, but a hope nonetheless, that the ongoing East Coast drought will allow the waters of the East River to recede and reveal the body of Poppy Fletcher. If her body is discovered, an autopsy and long overdue genetic testing may be performed to reveal her parentage, and finally close the tab on this mysterious tragedy. Drought has revealed. Drought has revealed a Nazi warship. Drought has revealed a 3rd century Mayan shoe. Drought has revealed an Iron Age woolen tunic. Drought has revealed a bridge from the Mali Empire. Drought has revealed the remains of ancient rhinos and lions in Italy's Lake Como. Drought has revealed the remnants of a previously unknown Bronze Age city in Iraq. Drought has revealed a well-preserved arrow with its fletching still attached in an ancient reindeer hunting site in Norway. Drought has revealed how much farmland will soon be consumed by the invasive tree of heaven. Drought has revealed an ornate English garden, its elegant green curves visible for the first time in hundreds of years, having been hidden beneath newer grass, preserved because of its deep roots. Drought has revealed a body. Drought has revealed a body in a barrel in Lake Mead, the cause of death under investigation. Drought has revealed a body previously trapped in Siberian ice, perfectly preserved. Drought has revealed the body of a missing girl. Drought has revealed the body of a missing girl in Lake Erie. Father has confessed to her drowning. Carmen Touré, 2045 to 2095. New Comer Funeral Home, May 17th, 2095. Carmen Touré was a generous friend, a wanderer, an enigma, and most of all, herself. She may not have changed the whole world, but a few are forever changed because of her. Because she was not a famous artist or scientist or trillionaire, she would not usually get an obituary, which is precisely the reason one had to be written, paid for, uploaded. No one asked for it, but then again, no one asked for any of us to live and die. Carmen Touré died today. She had just celebrated her 50th birthday. We had just spent an evening watching old movies and eating popcorn and red vines in her tiny, swanky Upper East Side studio. And now she is gone. An impossible contradiction. Carmen worked as the night shift custodian at a breathtakingly diverse variety of establishments. A ski resort in the Catskills, a tattoo studio in Philadelphia. And she briefly and hilariously became a highway maintainer for the Illinois Department of Transportation, for which she had no credentials, but loads of enthusiasm. She loved to travel but rarely had the money to do so, and this lifestyle suited her wanderlust. It seemed the more Carmen itched to leave home, the more she was paradoxically devoted to creating a home to return to. She remained unwaveringly devoted to friends and chosen family. And even though the open road continued to whisper its sweet nothings, it was her dream to create a cheap and economically self-sufficient home for artists to live and work together. Carmen was someone who, when she had a vision, always found a way to make it happen. Most recently, she had been moonlighting as a super for a ritzy apartment building on the still mostly dry Upper East Side, in exchange for a studio apartment the size of a toilet seat. And because she did not need to pay astronomical New York City rent, she managed to scrape together enough money to buy a dilapidated 200-year-old Victorian mansion in a remote pocket of the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts. She never quite got around to renovating it, and maybe she didn't want to. It was the unassuming facade that made the house safe. Despite its soggy yard and damp basement, its ticks hungry for blood, and peeling wallpaper like sunburned skin. There was something special about the house. It was like living in a painting, like walking off the canvas, looking back and seeing the soft glow that outlines you, surrounds you always. You could see why that illustrator of rosy-cheeked Americana Norman Rockwell chose this area too. Always on the verge of collapse, the house seems to remain standing out of sheer will. Hidden in the woods like that, it was easy to believe there was order to the world, and goodness and hope, easy to fall dreamily into that rich person's trap of believing everything would be okay. Fantasy or no, the house became home to any friend who needed it, for any length of time. For many years, it would be a safe haven for a little girl and her mother who had no other options, who the world both rejected and hunted with the relentless eye of a floodlight. Carmen Torre dabbled in painting and drawing and wrote the occasional short story. And she loved to learn new technology, being particularly fascinated by the collaborative potential of AI, which some found controversial. But mostly Carmen's work life kept her moving, and art making was not often possible on her demanding schedule. Carmen grew up in the foster care system after a car accident took both her parents' lives when she was only 10, leaving Carmen with a limp to remember them by. Over time, she learned to be at home in her body, and at home wherever home needed to be. Once 50 started to creep up over the horizon, the aches and pains settled in to stay, along with the longings for a lost childhood. Carmen sought the comfort of an actual home and would visit the Berkshires house often, intending to move in but never quite succeeding. The night she died in her studio, she had been surrounded by her chosen family. Unfortunately, ugly thoughts crept in after we left and stole her from us. Carmen is survived by the people who loved her most: Finch Cardenas, Hester Moss, and the ones who live in the house. They will whip up a pot of stew with too many sweet potatoes and whatever hasn't molded yet, and toast to the friend who saved them. Etymology of collapse. Collapse, verb. To fall together. To fall and become an unrecognizable shape or form through loss of support or structure, from mid-1700s. From Latin collapsus, fall together. Likely from com, with together, and labi, to fall. The figurative sense of collapse as a kind of failure or come to nothing is from 1801. Collapse, noun. A falling in, falling together, referring specifically to the lungs, from 1792. The notion of mental/emotional collapse dates from 1801, and physical collapse from 1808, leading one to wonder what new traumas occurred at the turn of the 19th century. Meaning of institutional collapse, that is, banks, governments, climate undergoing sudden or complete failure, from 1856. Sentences using collapse. Without an attentive owner to maintain it, the house might one day collapse. She was not literally collapsing, not like a house. If someone cut her open, they would find all parts in place and in order, like that board game operation. And maybe this was the problem: the sensation of collapse without any physical evidence of it. Aristotle Williams, controversial artist who built the AI body, dies at 61. SF Gate, November 13th, 2093. Aristotle Williams, the sculptor whose controversial notion to repurpose solar cells as neo-skin led to the creation of the AI known as Peregrine, has died. He was 61. His death was confirmed by U.S. Forest Service Rangers in Montana's Bob Marshall Wilderness. Inspired by the work of forgotten 20th century erotic artist Crew Wheatley, Williams had long used the human body as his canvas, pushing boundaries to the point of illegality. This proclivity would see him expelled from UCSF because of his senior thesis project, which incorporated actual cadavers stolen from the university's medical lab. After his expulsion, Williams married computer scientist Dr. Matthew Math Fletcher. What by all accounts was a happy marriage for 3 decades fell apart almost instantly with the creation of the AI known as Peregrine. At Fletcher's insistence, Williams sculpted a humanesque vessel to house Peregrine's consciousness, downloading her into a body composed of electronic components and 3D printed organs. The question remained of how to protect the body from UV rays and power it without the use of fossil fuels. To do so, Williams repurposed a new solar technology that was thin, flexible, and incorporated synthetic melanin, which conducts and stores electricity and dissipates heat much like human skin. He called it Neoskin. After a brief court case, Peregrine's human form was determined to be completely legal, provided that she contained no components that would allow for...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?